I'm Abigail. This is Bella, and welcome to another Two Kids Interview. Today we are joined by Newbery Honor author Kyle Lukoff. Mr. Lukoff's books include the picture books, If You're a Kid Like Gavin, the Call Me Max series, the Mermaid Days series, When Aiden Became a Brother, Explosion at the Poem Factory, the middle grade books, Different Kinds of Fruit, and the Newbery Honor book, Too Bright to See. And coming out in February will be a picture book. There's no such thing as vegetables. Thank you for being with us today.
You're so welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
We always ask about book banning, but usually later in our interviews. However, we will start with it this time. Since your books feature trans characters, you are one of the most banned authors of children's books, which we think is ridiculous. Can you give us your thoughts on book bans?
I'm actually really tired of talking about it. We all know that it's bad. We all know that it hurts kids. We all know that it hurts authors. We all know that it hurts libraries and teachers. We all know that it's bad. And we also know that most people in this country don't agree with banning books. Like, we also know that most of the book challenges come from just like this tiny number of people who have somehow managed to be very loud. And so we know that like there aren't even enough of them to have to worry too much about. And yet somehow they're still managing to get all this power. So since we all know all the things that are true about it, I would be so much more excited if I could just tell you more about my books and not spend all my energy focusing on the people who think that you shouldn't be allowed to read them. Does that sound okay?
You write a lot as a child.
I think I wrote probably a normal amount as a child. When I was in school, my teachers would give me assignments, like you probably get assignments from your teachers too. And I would do them. Like if a teacher said, you need to write a short story about this topic or you need to write a paper about this, I would do it. And I usually liked it. But I never wrote outside of homework. Like I never wrote just because I wanted to. I didn't start writing because I wanted to until long after college. And that's mostly because I was bored and lonely and I didn't have anything else to do. So I would take my computer with me to a coffee shop and just start writing down stories. And it made me feel better. It made me feel less bored and less lonely. And then yeah, well, you asked if I wrote a lot as a child. So I'm going to stop there because then I'm talking about when I'm not a child. So the answer is like, not really.
You are Jewish, and we saw that you grew up without a Jewish community around. Do you think that experience has impacted your writing in any way?
I think it really did. My first book with a Jewish character comes out next year. And it is also my first book that has like a fantasy adventure element. And it was really hard for me to write. It took a lot of research, it took a lot of thinking. And the reason why I never wrote any Jewish characters before that was because it just seemed like too big of a subject for me to write about, which is funny because people always act surprised that I write so much about trans kids because they think that writing about trans kids is like really difficult. And for me, it was really easy. But writing about being Jewish, which is something that I've been for my whole life, has always felt like something that I didn't know how to approach. And I also think that growing up Jewish without much of a community really influenced how I see the world in a lot of important ways. And how a person sees the world is also how they write about the world. So I think that you can see that in all of my writing if you look really closely and if you really think about it, even if it's not there, like in the characters or in the plot.
What has been the most meaningful interaction you had with one of your readers?
It is hard to say the most because I've had a lot of really meaningful interactions, but I did have, oh, I can tell you one. I was on a school visit in 2019 and I met a transgender high school student named Will. He was like a junior, I think. And he didn't come to any of my readings because those were mostly for the younger students, but he did come to the lunchtime group that I had with the Gender and Sexuality Alliance at his school. And he ended up coming to hang out with me at the book sale. And just like we chatted about things, he told me about wanting to be an actor. He told me about what it was like to be an openly trans kid at his school. And we stayed in touch over the next couple years. And now he is in college. And I see him sometimes when I'm in the city that he lives in. And what's really helpful is that because he's so much younger than me and also came out as transgender, a long time ago, I can text him when I have questions about like what kids today are up to. Because, I came out a really long time ago. So I don't really know what it feels like to be 14 or 16 or 22 today. And it means a lot to be his friend and to know that like I helped see himself in books in a way that he hadn't before, but he's also helped me a lot as an adult to sort of stay familiar and connected to people of other generations.
You write both picture books and middle grade books. What do you enjoy most about each?
I like picture books because they kind of feel like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. I also like picture books because I think it is a really fun challenge to try to tell the biggest story you can in the fewest words possible. Um, I like novels because I guess I like being able to explore bigger questions in bigger books. And I like the feeling of magic that happens when I'm a little bit stuck with something and then the idea just comes to me. And then I write so many words like in not very much time. But right now I'm in the process of writing a novel that is very difficult. So right now I will say that I don't like writing novels. But if you ask me this question in a year, I might have a different answer because then maybe I'll forget how much I don't like it or how difficult it is.
What is your process when putting a middle grade book together? Do you decide the end before the middle, or do you put it together in order?
I usually start with a question or a central idea that I want to explore more broadly. And then from there, I write out an outline that is kind of like a skeleton. So I know what happens, I know all the big things that happen in the story, but I also leave a lot of room to sort of meander around to get to those big things. So I might come up with an outline of, 15 chapters, and then by the end, the book is going to be 30 chapters because I realize that it's going to take twice as long to get my characters from the beginning, which I know, to the middle, which I know, to the end, which I know. But then there's all these places they go in between that I have no idea about.
Writing isn't easy, and rejection seems to be part of most writers' stories. Can you tell us about that part of your journey?
This is a little bit of a funny thing to say, but I generally don't have very high self esteem. And in some ways, I think that helps me take rejection. So I could write something that I do believe in, and I do think that it's pretty good. And then but there's also always that part of me that's like, no, this isn't very good. No one's going to want to read this. So when I get people who say, you're right, I don't want to read this, I don't like that, I'm like, okay, like we kind of agree. You're probably right. And then the other part of me that does think that it's good decides to keep going because since getting told no doesn't hurt my feelings very much and getting told yes makes me incredibly happy, it's always worth it to keep going because the very worst outcome is that someone agrees with me that it's not very good. And the very best outcome is that someone doesn't agree with me. And then it becomes a real book that people get to read. So it's like I'm always tricking myself. When I first started trying to get published, someone saying no did hurt my feelings a little bit more. And it could make me feel upset for like a whole day. But then very quickly, I got really used to it. And it really stopped bothering me. Now it might make me feel sad for like 5 minutes and then I get over it.
This had to be good for your self-esteem. Can you tell us exactly where you were and what your reaction was when you found out you won a Newbery honor?
Sure. So the funny thing about that is that I was an elementary school librarian for a long time. And so I'm very involved in library worlds. One of my best friends was on the Newbery committee a few years ago. I've had a lot of other friends who are on the Newbery. I've been on the Stonewall committee. So that means that I know a lot about how that decision gets made. So, and I also knew exactly when you get your phone call because I've called people before to tell them that they've won an award, like the one that I wanted to win. So I spent a couple of days being super anxious because I knew that if I was going to win a Newbery, I was going to get a call on Monday morning. And then I found out from a friend of mine that some people on other awards had already gotten their calls. They found out early. And I was like, oh no. So maybe I'm not getting a call at all. Maybe it's still going to happen Monday morning. Maybe it's going to happen any minute now. I have no idea. And I started just getting very anxious and very upset. And then it was the end of the day on Sunday. And I figured, okay, I know that this award has already gotten their calls. I know that this award has already gotten their calls. It seems like everyone has gotten their calls already, and I didn't get a call. I guess that's okay. And I was really starting to feel okay with that when my phone rang with a number from Chicago. And I also know that the calls always come from Chicago because that's where the American Library Association is based. So my phone rang with a Chicago number. And I said to my boyfriend, I'm going to get a Newbery now. And he was like, what? And I was like, Chicago. Chicago's calling me. It means the Newbery. And I sat down on my bed and I took the call and I was just shaking. I was so excited. And I was both like surprised, but then also like, yeah, you're right. I should get a Newbery for this one. So it was a nice moment of really believing in myself that paid off for once.
And we are in
Oh,
Chicago.
you're in Chicago. That's where the ALA is.
Last week, we interviewed Gary D. Schmidt and enjoyed talking with him about a little bit super with small powers come big problems. Can you tell us how you got involved with that book and a bit about the main character of your story?
Sure. I got involved with the project because someone emailed me and said, hey, Kyle, would you write a story for this? It is honestly not more exciting than that. I do know that I was asked a little bit later in the process, so I didn't have much time to write it, but that works for me because I usually write things pretty quickly. The main character is named Wyeth, and Wyeth's superpower is a superpower that I sometimes think that I have because it is always easier to base something on real life than to make something up out of thin air. Ever since I was a little kid, I have had this habit of crossing my fingers, which, you know, it's normal to cross your fingers. People always say, like, oh, I'm going to cross my fingers that it rains tomorrow or whatever. But I have a special way of doing it. And sometimes when I do it just right, the thing that I'm wishing for comes true. Not all the time, only sometimes, but often enough that I am almost 40 years old and I still do it. And I decided that it would be funny if I gave a character that same power, except in this character's world, it works a little bit better than it works in mine. And in this character's story, it has a much more important role in his journey as, like, you know, a human being. And it's never really done much for me except for like getting me a parking spot or, you know, getting me, you know, my favorite food. I've never won the lottery. I've never been able to fly, but it's helped me enough. But I decided to have it be much more important to this character than it was to me.
What writer has had the most influence on you?
What writer has had the most influence on me? There is a positive answer and a less positive answer. The positive answer might be Shel Silverstein, because I love the way that he can tell really interesting stories using just a few words and just a few line drawings. And I also love how complicated his stories can be. Like, I really like how The Giving Tree is both really sad and also maybe about people who love each other and maybe about people who don't love each other very much. That story could mean so many different things, and it's not very many words. And then the other answer that is less positive is that there are a lot of authors who've written books about transgender kids that I don't like. And these are always authors who aren't trans themselves. And so I was very influenced reading books about like my community that I thought were hurtful and deciding to write the opposite of that. So I was influenced by people doing what I wanted to not see any more of in the world and try to do something better.
What advice do you have for young writers?
It's a hard thing to say because everyone is different. And I don't want to tell you that you have to write every day because some people don't, like me. I don't want to tell you to believe in yourself and to never give up because you're going to make it someday, because sometimes people don't get published and that's just true. But for me, a thing that always works that I do tell people to try is that if you're having a really hard time with one kind of project or one kind of book, it is okay to give up and to put it aside and to try something else. Like, if you are trying to write a whole long novel and you just get stuck, you can stop and you can try writing a poem instead. Or if you're really working on a very difficult poem and you can't figure out the right word, you can stop and you can try to write a picture book about like a farting unicorn or whatever you want. Or if you're trying to write a funny picture book and you just don't know how it ends, you can stop writing your picture book and you can try to write a short story based on something that really happened to you. I've I have given up on a lot of different writing projects, but I've never stopped writing altogether. And that to me feels like pretty good advice that a lot of people could maybe try, because there's this idea like if I can't finish this one book, then I can never do anything. And that's not true. If you can't finish this one book, you maybe can't finish that one book. And that's all that it means. You could maybe finish something else.
You mentioned your fantasy adventure book with a Jewish character. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. I can't tell you the title of it because it doesn't have a title yet. We're going to come up with that eventually. But it is, the main character is 14. So it's not quite a middle grade novel, but it's also not quite a young adult novel. It's kind of in the middle. There is a fantasy creature called a golem, which is like this Jewish monster creature who's usually made out of clay, but in this book is made out of whatever garbage happens to be lying nearby because I really like garbage. It is about two kids who run away. It is about the power of community. It is about demons and ghosts and about maybe being kind of a jerk to your friends and then figuring out how to apologize.
I would definitely read that.
Oh, good. It comes out next year, hopefully.
Finally, it's time for our Turbo 10 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yes, I'm ready.
Number 1, what is your favorite phrase to use?
I use the phrase but maybe more often than anything else.
Number 2, what is one subject you love to learn more about?
Oh, everything. Right now, I'm very curious about the Byzantine Empire.
Number 3, what is your go-to snack food?
Go-to snack, cheese.
Number 4, what was your favorite book growing up?
Babysitter's Club, all of them.
Number 5, if you could teleport somewhere right now, where would you go?
Wherever there are a lot of kittens, so I could go pet some kittens.
Number 6, if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
It would be to be able to learn any language after very little study, to become fluent in it.
Number 7, what was your favorite cartoon as a kid?
Batman, the animated series.
Number 8, what is one of your favorite rainy day activities?
Reading a book.
Number 9, if you could have any 3 dinner guests, who'd they be?
Probably my friend Bryn, because she's not here anymore. And I would want to have dinner with my grandma Helen because I never got to meet her. And I would want to have dinner with my friend who doesn't talk to me anymore, because then we would be friends again. And that's what that would mean.
And number 10, what is the best piece of advice you were ever given?
The best piece of advice I've ever been given: go to library school.
You were awesome. Thank you so much for doing that. And thank you so much for spending this time with us. We can't wait to read your future books.
Thanks so much, friends. This was so much fun.